torrential rain event. I know it's not easy driving around, let alone when it's raining like this. So we appreciate it. And if you would allow us to have a moment of silence. Today is Peace Officer Memorial Day, and many of your communities probably had some type of ceremony, but I think in light of this special day and what Charlotte has gone through in our surrounding communities the past couple of weeks, if we could take a moment just to appreciate our officers. Right. I appreciate that so much. And to our officer back here, thank you for always being here. We appreciate you. Okay, excellent. We'll go ahead and get started. If everybody's okay, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll have the adoption of the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
We've got everybody's all excited about, so. Great, we've got a first and a second. Any discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to public comment. Secretary, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Okay, great. Well, we're sailing right along. No public comments, and moving on to ethics awareness and conflict of interest reminder. Neil, will you help us with that?
In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any of the matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved.
Hearing none, we will take that as a no and move on from there. Moving on to the consent agenda. You'll notice that we have consent agenda that covers kind of 2 months. As last month, we didn't quite have enough people here for the a quorum, so we're going to adopt both of those. If I could get a motion to. Okay. Mayor Becker's made a
Second.
That's good. The second, we've got a first and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Moving on with our project spotlight that we have each month. So we're going to hear from far-flung Troutman. Does everybody know what Troutman is? All right, nobody knows where Troutman is, Andrew. You better.
Oh, I got that covered in my presentation.
All right, good, good.
Okay.
Andrew, we're excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Board. It's nice to be in front of the board again tonight. I am going to talk about the Troutman Mobility Plan. I'm going to touch base on a little bit about Troutman, how we were able to acquire funding for this plan, what the plan entails, and how this plan has paid dividends already. So, without further ado, where is Troutman?
I had no
Now-
idea about this.
Now, it's not that I think that there's anybody in this room that doesn't know where Troutman is, but I think to assume that could be a bad assumption on my part. So where is Troutman? Troutman is located about 35 miles north of where we sit tonight. It's a quick ride up I-77 depending on traffic. It is positioned between the two largest municipalities in Iredell County, which is Statesville to the north and Mooresville to the south. Some travel trends in Troutman. We do have a significant amount of through traffic, and those are mainly commuters. And I'll also say when school's in session, we do have 5 schools in the Troutman jurisdiction. So those put even more tax on the road. Troutman is also home to Lake Norman State Park, which is a very popular seasonal destination. And I'll say as somebody who made the decision to move near the state park about 8 years ago, I have seen an increase in traffic on that road tenfold in those 8 years. So Troutman by the numbers, the population of Troutman grew 55% between the 2010 and 20 censuses. The growth has been even faster since the 2020 census. Currently, we have about 5,000 new residential units on the books. That means either being constructed or not under construction yet. And this map you see on this slide kind of details where all of our residential development is. Two things I want you to remember, because I'm gonna hit at these at the end when I wrap this thing up, is Troutman has no in-house engineering staff. And at full staff, the planning department is a department of two. At the present time, I'll say it's a department of one, so I'm on an island. But I will say Troutman is a small town. We are growing. We don't quite have the staff yet to meet the growth demands of the citizens. The biggest transportation challenges in Troutman. We do have a significant increase in the number of vehicles. Obviously, with the residential development we have, you would expect that. There's difficulty turning onto US 21, which is our main street. It bisects the town. It's tough to make a left-hand turn, basically anytime during the day, but particularly the peak hours. I've got this one highlighted because this is another point that I want to wrap up with. So another thing to remember, the lack of infrastructure has caused heavy delays at our major intersections. And then I think we've all felt this, but NCDOT funding shortfalls have delayed a couple projects throughout the town, which has contributed to some of the congestion we do have in the town. The main street we have, US 21, this is our STIP project. I mentioned that delays have kind of impacted this. The chart you see here is a history of this project. As you can see, it has a history of being in the STIP, and then once COVID hit, we were delayed to 2029. Currently, with our Main Street project, we're funded only for preliminary engineering, and we look to be reprioritized in P7. And I guess that'll be a plug for Travis, who's going to be talking about P7 a little bit later on tonight. So Main Street is our main street through town. It's a 2-lane road. We were anticipating a 4-lane road going through town, but at this point in time, that has been delayed. So that is the reason why we wanted to look at a plan. So how did we get funding for the plan? We apply for PL dollars. You may ask, what are PL dollars? Well, those of you who've been on the board for a while know that we have 2 discretionary funding calls a year. One is in the spring, which is currently open. Actually, I think it just closed. Those are for shortfall projects only. And the second one is in the fall, and those are for new projects. The cool thing about the fall call is it offers up to $500,000 for the CRTPO region to use towards planning initiatives. So in 2021, I decided, well, why don't we put in an application to get a new plan for the town of Troutman? We applied for $120,000. This did include a 20% local match, so the town did pay for $24,000 of that total. Funds became available to us in July of 2022, and this plan was completed and adopted by the Troutman Town Board in the fall of 2023, which was perfect timing, and I'll get to that in a little while. So why did the town want to do this plan? Well, I mentioned that our STIP project had been delayed. We were looking to ways to improve US 21 without widening, because the town cannot fund anything like that itself. And our last comprehensive transportation plan was from 2009. And I'll say it's outdated. I'll also say that that plan, it projected the population of Troutman in the year 2030 to be 2,700 people. Well, we've more than doubled that in 2024. So the projections of that plan were a little bit short. So what did the town want to accomplish in this plan? Once again, I got another thing highlighted here. Take a smaller look at intersections versus the whole system. And then also try to identify some short-term projects that can be built without using federal funds. So I'll go ahead and touch base on this highlighted line I have here. 2 times I've mentioned intersections. Money for a plan to specifically look at intersections on a corridor is not anything new. This is something that we had taken from another jurisdiction. So probably about 8 years ago or so, Union County did a study about intersections along some of the main corridors in the county. And while I was, thinking, brainstorming about what we wanted to accomplish in this plan, that plan kind of resonated with me, and that's pretty much what I modeled this plan after. So what did we do with our intersections? We started with a steering committee that was made up of local stakeholders. We selected 10 intersections throughout town to look at. 3 of these intersections were selected for advanced design details. And then the remaining 7 were basically just given recommendations such as turn lanes, stoplights, maybe a future roundabout, those kind of higher scale recommendations. The cool thing we did in this plan, I think, as far as scoring these 10 intersections, We actually took the CRTPO discretionary funding guidelines and used those to score these intersections. Therefore, we already knew which of our intersections would score well if we came back to CRTPO to ask for additional discretionary funding. And I'll say, based on the picture on this slide, it's too bad that gentleman isn't looking at the camera because I just know he's a handsome guy. The second part of our plan was to look at focus areas. We looked at 3 areas in town that are growing a little bit exponentially more than others, or we feel they will grow. So the first is Barium Springs, and this was just approved as the town's first real multi-use development. And when I say approved, it was a rezoning with a concept plan. But we anticipate somewhere along the lines of 2,700 residential units, along with a commercial component to this development. The second one, which is in the middle of this map, is Autumn Leaf Road. We've just had a significant amount of development and development pressure along that area. And the third one is looking at Exit 42, which is our main entrance from I-77. What we really did with these focus areas is look at potential new roadway connections, access roads, anything just that we can put on a map to require development of roadways that will connect these properties once they are developed. So you're probably saying to yourself, so what? It's just a plan. It'll sit on the shelf and collect dust. When staff turns over, it'll be ignored. Planners are nerds. However, this plan has resulted in immediate impacts. As I had mentioned, the great timing of when this plan was approved, it was approved in the fall of 2023, which coincided with the fall call of 2023. So on a whim, the town decided to submit an application for discretionary funding dollars for one of our intersections. Our highest ranking intersection project is the one I'm showing here on the screen here. It's basically intersection improvements to our main street along with Old Mountain Road and Murdoch Road. Old Mountain Road goes down to South Iredell High School, which again creates traffic, and then Murdoch Road leads to I-77. So as luck would have it, our project scored well enough to secure discretionary funding from CRTPO in order to be programmed this time around. And as you can see, it was programmed with PE in fiscal year 2025. We're looking at right-of-way in 27 and construction in 2029. So the key takeaways I have here. Now, I did mention Troutman is short on staff. So the first and foremost, wear out CRTPO staff. There's not much of this engineering stuff, cost estimates that I know anything about, but reaching out to Jennifer, Paul, Neil, Brian Elgort sat in our steering committee, wear them out, ask questions, they will get you in the right place. I had mentioned the intersection plan from Union County. If you see something cool, steal that idea, because you know what? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So just go ahead. If you see something you like it, take it. And the last one I have here is shoot for the stars. What I mean, if it doesn't matter how big or small you are, if you have an idea about a project you think could benefit your town and you have some backing with your elected officials, take the chance, put in an application. The worst that could happen is it doesn't get funded this go around. So with that, those are the 3 keys that I wanted to give you tonight with our Troutman mobility plan, the process, and how we've gone through it. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll open it up for any questions that anybody may have for me.
Questions for Andrew? That was very well done. Nobody has any questions? So when you talk about utilizing CRTPO staff for help on that, can you give some examples of how you were able to utilize the staff with
Sure.
everything that you need with your staff of 1,
Yes.
2?
We'll start from the start. To begin with, some may look at the application and say, what does this mean? So the first thing is getting a crash course in a language I don't understand from Jennifer about how to fill out this application and fill it out to the best of the ability for the town to do, for the highest, I guess the highest chances that we do get some funding. So the first thing to do is just make sure you know what you're doing, use them to help you in any way possible. I had mentioned cost estimates. So a cost estimate is required for any engineered project, capital project you submit. Well, we had an estimate from a consultant. However, it wasn't quite buttoned up as much as it should have been. So again, we opened, my point of contact has always been Jennifer, but Jennifer pulled in Paul, who lucky enough had just been hired by CRTPO. So I don't know if it was good or not for him, but one of the first people he dealt with was myself. So he didn't quit. Maybe he should have, but anyway, Paul was, with his engineering background, was very helpful in helping us get a cost estimate that not only was accurate, but would have been competitive with this project. And then with that, just going through the process, anything else we could do. I'll say we presented this mobility plan presentation at the planning conference back in October. And Neil was the member of CRTPO who was selected to speak with myself and the consultants. So they've had their hands all over this, and I appreciate all the work they've done with us.
All right, great success by a small town, so it can be done. Yes. Oh, Mayor Higdon, please. Ernestine, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The event that I saw in the picture,
Mhm.
Marshville, we have a problem with getting people out. What type of event was that? Because it looked like it was really successful. You had the information set up,
Mhm.
and then there were a lot of people in the background. What type
Sure.
of event was that?
Yeah, this was actually, it was a springtime craft festival that the South Alabama High School holds every year. So we decided to set up a booth there, so to say. And it was a consultant, RSNH, you can see the logo on the bottom of the slide. Their representative and myself on a Saturday morning. And we did a good job of working the floor. So we went around to people if they were kind of looking at us and, no, you can come here, we're going to talk to you. So this was just an event that we went to that the town held, and it just happened to coincide with a portion of the project that we did have the public comment open.
All right, feedback. Mayor Higdon?
How much money were you awarded?
For the capital project, we were awarded 3.5 million, and the town put a 35% match on that. So the project's somewhere 5.3-ish.
Thank you.
Others? All right. Thanks, Andrew, for sharing. That's a great presentation. Where are we going to go to next month? Neil, who's our next candidate?
Yeah, I had pretty easy pickings the first 3 months with project spotlights, but if any of you all have projects that are underway or you just cut a ribbon on something, you're about to complete a project, get in touch with Judy or myself, and we'll get a member of your staff scheduled on the June 26th agenda or the July agenda.
Super. Otherwise, one of your staff may get voluntold, so just help them out. Great. All right, we're going to move right along to item number 7, the update on the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Neil puts on another hat.
Good evening again. So this is an action item before the CRTPO board tonight to approve the start of a public comment period in early June to receive public input on the proposed goals and objectives within the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and on candidate projects. So here's an agenda for my presentation tonight. We'll cover the revision process to the plan's goals and objectives. I'll touch on engagement. We'll reveal the branding associated with this plan update, and we'll talk about ongoing work and next steps. So in terms of the goals and objectives, what's different for the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan? And as some of you know, we're required to update this plan every 4 years. And since the adoption of the 2050 MTP in March of 2022, there's been the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the federal bill, and the CRTPO has undertaken a federal certification review. So some of the notable themes within the IIJA legislation for MPOs is a focus on carbon reduction, resilience, housing, equity, transportation technology, and safety. And then moving into the certification review areas, we received recommendations to address resiliency in stormwater, to coordinate with stakeholders to implement the congestion management process procedures. And in terms of tourism planning, this was a new one for us, to consult with local travel and tourism agencies to better address needs throughout the planning area. And this certification review with Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration occurred last June 2023. So in terms of how that relates to the goals and objectives, the IIJA legislation and the CERT review, we intend for our revisions to be high level. And the goals and objectives are really meant to guide the plan development and future initiatives throughout the organization over the next 4 years. The way this worked is initial staff and consultant assessment indicated that major changes to our goals and objectives from the 2050 version were not necessary. And we have formed, as I mentioned last month, advisory committee comprised of TCC members, steering committee members comprised of CRTPO staff, and then these will also be reviewed during the public comment period. And ultimately, the revised goals and objectives after the public comment period will be presented to the TCC and the board for adoption. So we began with the 2050 goals and objectives, and we had an extensive review and editing process during the 2050 MTP. That extensive review was really to make these, this is a term I don't like, but evergreen. You know, our goals and objectives are pretty consistent in a growing area with a lot of different issues. But there is always a need to revisit them every plan development process and make some small updates, but completely revising them, staff and the consultants felt like was unnecessary to start from scratch, so to speak. We moved into the steering committee and the advisory committee, and we've undertaken a first round of comments and revisions to these. And then the advisory committee will advise the project team, you know, in terms of the public review draft, and they'll also advise us as to how to take public comments and determine whether or not they necessitate revisions to the goals and objectives. So the next couple of slides will show the 6 goals and objectives from the 2050 MTP, as well as some of the initial markups. So this first slide, this is goal 1. And what you're looking at here is anything that's marked yellow addresses an IIJA emphasis area. Anything that is marked green addresses a certification review recommendation. Anything that's in that teal color, we feel that it addresses both IIJA and a cert review recommendation. So there's a lot of different coloring in here. And then the second iteration of the slide, you'll see some markups. So I'm going to focus on the process and not individual changes with these. And you will have an opportunity to review these in detail throughout the public comment period and provide me with comments on these. So again, this is the version of goal 1 from the 2050 MTP. And then this is the marked up editing in red for goal 1. So you can see within objective 1.1, we're making some text changes there. Whenever there's a box drawn around a particular objective, that means that we had some significant discussion with the advisory committee. We do have another meeting with the advisory committee later on this month to kind of present their comments and what we recommend changing. So we may have some more updates about objective goal 1.2 here. So moving into goal 2, there are 7 objectives associated with goal 2. And you can see that we believe that 2.1 addresses a cert review recommendation. This is the marked up version with the initial comments from the steering committee and the advisory committee. You can see that objective 2.3, there's some heavy discussion around objective 2.3, and we've made some initial revisions to that. Moving into goal 3, there are 3 objectives coming from the 2050 MTP within goal 3. And we're proposing to add 3 new objectives. 3.4 would address the greenhouse gas emphasis area within IIJA. Objective 3.5 would address and mitigate stormwater impacts, both within IIJA and the CERT review. And 3.6 would incorporate resiliency into the goals and objectives, which again would address recommendations from the certification review and the IIJA emphasis area. Moving into goal 4, there are 3 objectives associated with goal 4. And there is one revision associated with objective 4.3, but 4.2, again, we need to discuss some of the comments that we heard from the advisory committee earlier this month and determine whether or not that necessitates changes within the public comment period. Goal 5, there are 3 objectives within goal 5 coming from the 2050 MTP. And then the marked up version, we did have a lot of discussion around objective 5.1. And lastly, Goal 6, there are 4 objectives from the 2050 MTP. And we're proposing to add a new objective regarding the certification review focus area to engage the travel and tourism industry. And we're also proposing to combine former 6.1 and 6.2 objectives there. So before I go any further, that was a lot of slides, a lot of text to move through. I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable with the steps we've taken so far and how that might relate to the action before you all tonight, before I move into the public engagement process.
Questions?
Who exactly do you talk to about travel and tourism?
So what we're proposing is to engage the chambers of commerce and those involved in tourism throughout the Charlotte region.
So HTA, CRVA?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Neil right now? No, hearing none.
Okay. And this just reiterates the timeline. So we met with our steering committee, which is, again, the more internal committee comprised of CRTPO staff, CATS and CDOT to initially review those goals and objectives. We convened the first meeting of the advisory committee on April 30th, and we reviewed the goals and objectives. And that's where you saw some of those red triangles where we had a lot of really good discussion. We took some good notes. We're summarizing those notes, and we're getting ready to meet with the advisory committee again later on this month to finalize those. At the TCC meeting, there was action to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period that passed unanimously. Obviously, I'm here tonight asking for action to open that public comment period. And then throughout the month of June, we propose to open this public comment period, if approved tonight, on June 3rd through July 3rd. There'll be continual discussion amongst the steering and advisory committees. TCC and board will have an opportunity to review these goals and objectives and the proposed revisions in detail before action is being requested in August to approve these goals and objectives. So I want to emphasize that this isn't the last time you'll see these. You'll definitely have an opportunity over the next month or so to review these and provide us with any recommended modifications or edits. So moving into engagement, we have 3 phases of engagement associated with the 2050 MTP update. So the first is focused on the project kickoff and identifying transportation needs from residents throughout the planning area. Again, that will begin next month and end in August. Phase 2 is the draft recommendations feedback. This is March of 2025 through May of 2025. This is after we have received candidate roadway and transportation projects from your TCC members, your jurisdiction staff, and we have gone through the process of ranking those and developing a draft fiscally constrained project list. That really becomes the list coming out of the 2055 MTP. And then lastly, plan review and validation. This is anticipated to occur in October of 2025 through December. This is when we have the draft plan in place, and we want to make sure that we've gotten everything right, not only about the region, but about your community's priorities. And throughout these 3 engagement processes, it's very important for your jurisdictions to help us promote this plan effort. It's something we do every 4 years, but this area is growing very rapidly, and all of your residents have transportation concerns. So again, we'd recommend that your PIOs or town clerks, coordinate with Judy and myself to really make sure that we're doing a good job of promoting this plan update. In terms of engagement, the last time we did this, the 2050 MTP, 2020, 2021, unfortunately, it was conducted almost exclusively virtually due to COVID-19. It did provide some opportunities in terms of allowing people to attend meetings virtually, but we did miss out on engaging with residents in some of the communities in our planning area that may not have reliable internet access, that work several jobs, that have transportation issues. So with 2055 MTP, we do want to get out face-to-face in the community. We're incorporating roughly 20 pop-up events and targeted engagement to equity focus groups, conducting stakeholder interviews. Again, the goal is to connect with the areas and communities that we haven't heard from as much in the 2050 MTP. but we will still lean on digital engagement tools. I do believe that when I first started in this job, we'd have these meetings on Wednesday nights at a church, and we might have two people showing up about a stop sign, not about long-range transportation issues. So we're becoming more strategic in how we meet people at existing events. We utilize digital engagement tools, but holding those one-off public meetings, I think we're kind of getting out of that business for the most part. So again, a little more detail about phase one engagement. The purpose of this is raising awareness and identifying needs, focusing on outreach that reviews the goals and objectives, communicates the existing conditions for CRTPO, and identifies needs for each of the transportation modes. Again, this is proposed to start on June 3rd and end on July 3rd. The public will weigh in on the goals and objectives, transportation needs and candidate projects, vision for transportation in the region, and the public can participate by using the website for digital engagement opportunities, connecting with the project team at local events, and attending CRTPO, TCC, and board meetings. We have a 2055 MTP website. That's 2055mtp.org. It serves as the project hub. It provides opportunities to engage digitally, and it provides updates on ongoing activities and project processes, and it really becomes the repository for resources and deliverables. If you visit it today, it's fairly bare bones, but it's additive throughout the process. We will continue to add information about public engagement, information about upcoming scheduled events. The draft fiscally constrained project list will eventually end up here. The draft report will end up here when we're in the third phase of public comment. So continue to check back if there isn't a whole lot there. If you check it out this week, within a few months, you'll see a lot of information on this website. This is an example of the interactive mapping that we're going to provide for the public. Again, this will be accessible on the 2055mtp.org website. It's using a software called Social Pinpoint, where residents can use this to identify different multimodal transportation needs, intersections or roadway corridors that have congestion or safety issues with pedestrian and bicycle safety, transit needs, transit desirability in terms of providing better connectivity between point A and point B. So this will be launched along with the public engagement period for phase one. Here's a summary again of our promotional tools. We'll use flyers, social media postings. We'll have a special edition newsletter, meetings in a box, videos, continual updates to the website, webinars, and we will probably conduct radio interviews at least one point in the process. The final 2055 MTP branding. This slide illustrates some of it here, but this really is kind of the comprehensive view of what we're proposing for the branding throughout the 2055 MTP process. You can see we're using the planning area. We're emphasizing this is a multimodal transportation plan. We're utilizing our core colors. So ongoing work and next steps. Right now, we're working on data gathering and research. This will lead into an existing conditions report that will really summarize the state of transportation for our 3-county area, but also some of the land use and growth trends. Obviously, we're getting ready for phase one of public engagement in June of 2024. And then we're going to start working on the revenue forecast, which will inform how much available funding we will have a reasonable chance of anticipating throughout the life of the plan out to 2055. And that's a lot of coordination with NCDOT and FHWA about reasonable assumptions given the current STIP. So I'll conclude again by displaying the action requested. Happy to take any questions that you have tonight.
Questions? Greg? Oh, talking.
Yeah, sorry, just one question. When should we push this website out to our public and let them know that they should start looking and providing input? I'm assuming that would be also available on that website as well.
Yeah, and provided that the action's approved tonight, I think Judy can send this out to the public information officers and the clerks with instructions as to when everything is really ready to go. I think we have some of those elements there, but we're waiting on this action to be approved to really kind of set those gears in motion.
Question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've been through a lot of these processes in the city and there tends to be very kind of limited public response, like interested parties, activists, and so on. We found on the UDO, for example, people got really excited and woke up after they saw it going into effect. So I'm just wondering, how much weight does the feedback that you get from the public comment period have in determining the MTP?
We take every comment seriously. When we receive public comments, either written comments or comments at meetings, we categorize those. Staff goes through those and shares the comments with the advisory committee, which is again comprised of TCC members, and we come up with responses. We really value every comment, even if some of these comments aren't directly related to the scope of the MTP. But I'll say even for the 2050 MTP, we got some really good input. It was all virtual input, but thinking back to the 2045 MTP, we also got a lot of good input, with the first phase identifying the needs. It seems like residents are most interested in which projects make the cut in the second phase, which projects end up in that draft fiscally constrained project list.
But there is some latitude to interpret. I just think if a really motivated group of people came in and flooded the websites and stuff, we like you or we can interpret what we're seeing, and there's no rigid requirement that we act on the input that we get.
That's right. It's a judgment call, and you will have that where there's a project that's really either needed or maybe not needed, and that may overwhelm one of these public comment periods. So that is why we utilize the advisory committee to kind of act as our guidance on that. Does this rise to the level of revising something? Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. And really it's up to this board to make the decision on those things with the recommendation coming from the TCC.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion
Just
to
double check any
approve
other
the start.
questions?
Right, we can still
Oh, yeah.
discuss.
Oh,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
put the motion up there.
Neil, how are the goals and objectives that are adopted? How are they reviewed after the fact? Once roads and highways are planned, how do we see if they have been successfully implemented in those projects?
So one thing we do when we're preparing the final report, we really try to tie these to our federally required performance measures, or we try to tie them to specific elements of the MTP. And then once the MTP is adopted, we go through an exercise where we kind of come up with a list of commitments, and a key part of that is those goals and objectives. And we really try to line up implementation steps as to how we can ensure that these goals and objectives don't just kind of sit idle. And that's one of the things that we've been going through with the advisory committees. They've had a lot of great ideas, but some of the revisions to the goals and objectives either are not possible to implement by CRTPO or are just outside of the scope of the MTP. So I've kind of become the gatekeeper of the goals and objectives to inform the advisory committee as to, I don't think that we can add this because we can't show any implementation efforts associated with it after the plan adoption.
Councilmember Drees? Go for it.
Ready for a motion?
I guess.
I will move to approve the start of a public comment period as described on the screen.
Is there a second? We'll give Mayor Knox one, okay? We got a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. So open up the window, Neil. All right, moving on to our Safe Streets for Roads, Safe Street and Roads for All application. Will?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Get set up here. Awesome. Okay. Good evening, Board. Pleased to present to you an action request this evening for our application to the Safe Streets and Roads for All FY24 cycle. Flash the action request on the screen. So that is to adopt a resolution in support of the CRTPO's Safe Streets and Roads for All application. You'll see that resolution attached in your packet. I'm going to go through what our application is, what the program is all about, and some of the benefits that we envision for our jurisdictions for our members, and talk about the local in-kind match requirements as part of this grant program, and then again, provide you with the action request on screen and go ahead and proceed with that. So first and foremost, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program might be one that you've heard of before, and we've certainly been talking about it here at the MPO level. It's a product of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, so you might hear that interchangeably, but a very large investment in transportation, infrastructure and planning all throughout the country, makes over $3 billion available for future funding rounds related to transportation. And the main goal of this grant program is to improve roadway safety for all users, ultimately with the goal of reducing serious injuries and fatal crashes for any road user. So for bicyclists, pedestrians, motorists, transit users. It adopts the USDOT National Roadway Safety Strategy and uses the Safe System approach, which looks very comprehensively at all users, the built environment, vehicles, and the emergency response that has to take place for roadway incidents. For this program, it does so in a couple of different ways. So there's planning and demonstration grants. Those are for the purpose of developing, updating, or completing a safety action plan, as well as conducting supplemental safety if there's an existing plan that you want to do any sort of carry over planning on. You can also carry out demonstration activities to inform an action plan. And I'll get to a slide that talks about those, but these are great quick build strategies to kind of figure out if the recommendations are sound for the whole region or for a whole city or town to adopt. And ultimately what we've heard from USDOT is that our planning grants are undersubscribed. And so there's a higher chance of winning a planning grant than there is a capital grant, which is pretty common, but this is an especially undersubscribed part of this program. And the ultimate deliverable, as I've said, is a comprehensive safety action plan. So that is, again, focused on preventing those injuries and fatalities, but it does so through data analysis, through plenty of public engagement, really understanding from the built environment, from the user perspective, what are our challenges today with roadway safety, and ultimately then producing some recommendations and building upon any local plans in the region, which again we currently don't have a regional safety action plan, so that's our goal for this. But we are familiar with our communities in the planning area that have some. So this builds upon all of the existing planning work while creating, potentially some new opportunities for improving safety. And that ultimately leads to a capital grant program that communities that have a safety action plan can apply for. So the other really important piece of this is building eligibility for our communities that do not have a safety action plan. By the MPO creating one, those communities would now be eligible to go after capital dollars. So pretty critical part of the program there. There's a couple different bases for why we are applying to this grant. The first is the grant strategy that we've been working on for several months now. We surveyed transportation staff back in November of last year and ultimately found the survey pretty much asked the top project types and priorities that each community is finding within the projects that they're applying for or maybe looking at. The top two priorities of that survey were bike ped and traffic safety. So we know there's a flavor for it in our communities and certainly trying to go after some alternative funding to address that. Earlier this year, in about February, we submitted a raise application. The CRTPO has applied several times before for this. RAISE stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. This is another program under IIJA that infuses quite a lot of money into, again, looking at infrastructure. For us, we will be using that program 100% federally funded, targeting our disadvantaged communities with some more targeted safety planning and public engagement. So fingers crossed on that one. We should hear about that later this summer. And then finally, some meetings that we've had with USDOT that have really, those meetings have encouraged us to apply. As the MPO, we have a lot of regional benefit to being the leaders on this kind of plan and certainly collaborating with our jurisdictions to make it a really successful one. There's lots of local cost savings to the MPO leading this study versus individual communities having to procure consultants and kind of conduct the project management throughout the study. So really are several different bases for why we're applying. The next piece are demonstration projects. So under a safety action plan, you can combine the demonstration projects as a great low-cost, quick build activity for demonstrating the recommendations of a safety action plan. The USDOT puts these into 4 different categories. So there's feasibility studies. So this may be, as you see in the picture, they're testing a bike lane. So paint on the ground, maybe some flex posts, testing a short segment of a bike lane application or an intersection improvement or some sort of safety application, again, with a temporary type application of that. The next is regulatory engineering studies. So you're doing a feasibility study for a manual kind of application of safety. So in this case, we have a pedestrian hybrid beacon. We're testing the feasibility of that kind of permanent installation. You can do that as a demonstration project. We have behavioral operational pilots. So a lot of public engagement, education, outreach is a big piece of this one. So if there's an education campaign that you want to practice, demonstration project is a great way to do that. And then new technology pilots. So some of the preemptive emergency vehicle technology for traffic signals or any of the other kind of ITS stuff that we're seeing in the marketplace. Great opportunity to pilot that under this grant program. And so to give you all an idea of our overall project budget, so from USDOT, we're requesting $4 million. That leaves us with a remaining $1 million local match requirement. So NCDOT very graciously is providing us with $500,000 to supplement that local match. The remaining $500,000 is a local match that we will be seeking to collect locally. And I'm going to get into the next screen on that one because we're not doing so with a cash amount on that remaining half. But that brings our total project cost to $5 million. This methodology is basically based off of our MOU cost share. So the percentage that our jurisdictions contribute to us through the MOU, that is the same rationale that we use to calculate the in-kind number of in-kind hours that would be required from each jurisdiction. And so I'll go ahead and show you that. So again, to be very clear, this is not a cash match request. This is an in-kind request. And what that essentially means is we are counting staff hours, facility rental rates, materials costs. If you're printing flyers or any sort of public engagement materials, you are billing those to the grant. So it's any of those kind of billable activities that you can put towards this grant. Again, this is using the MOU cost share formula to calculate the cost per jurisdiction for that. And this also assumes a rate of $58 per hour with fringe benefits. So this number that you're seeing on the screen is staff time in hours that would be requested from each jurisdiction. And so happy to come back to this screen, but I'll talk a little bit more about some of the elements of this. So as I just shared, this includes staff time over the life of the project study, about a 2 to 3 year project period. So if the number on the screen seems maybe intimidating for the size of your jurisdiction, want to be very clear that this is a multi-year study. So we are pretty confident in the ability to achieve those hours, and we'll certainly work with the jurisdictions to make sure that y'all are comfortable with that arrangement. Facility rates. So again, if you're renting a community space, maybe it's your own town hall that you charge a rate to normally use for public events. You can charge that rate to the grant. That's taking away from your in-kind hours and you're deducting from that amount. And then again, material costs. So printing flyers, if you have an idea of the cost per page of a color print for you to do at the city level or to go to a printing store to complete, you can bill that to the grant. So want to be clear that in-kind matching is a very flexible form of match, and we're being very intentional to not ask y'all for a cash match for this reason. Here's a good example of what that could look like. So here we're showing staff time used to put together, local coordination meetings, doing data analysis, public engagement, kind of prepping for those types of activities. We're showing 3 different staff tiers, the amount of time that they would take to conduct all of this work, and the ultimate total value of that work. Again, assuming various staff rates and including fringe benefits as well. Then if you were to host a public event, going through the workshop, the setup, the workshop, and the cleanup, now including rental space on top of the staff hours, you see that you've already knocked out 28 hours over the whole process of not only conducting the public engagement session, but actually preparing for it as well. So there's lots of ways to really draw down this local in-kind requirement. I'll highlight the overall timeline that we've taken so far. So we've been talking with transportation staff. I mentioned that grant strategy that we've been developing. This has been taking place since last October and really having a lot of fruitful discussion just about the priorities of the region in terms of alternative funding for something like safety, especially. So we've been having those conversations since last year, have really then jumped into the elements of the grant and understanding maybe some of the needs that we can put into our application in the last couple of months. We've presented an information and action item to the TCC, have of course presented an information item to the board last month, and am now seeking your action on this item as well. And then we ultimately intend to apply for the tomorrow's deadline. There's 3 deadlines on this grant program, which makes it kind of unique. So we've already had one pass and we'll be looking to apply for the May deadline with an anticipated announcement in August. Okay. Flash the action back on the screen. I want to clarify one thing if I haven't said it already as well. The resolution that we are asking for your support of tonight is not your official commitment to this in-kind requirement. It is just a letter or resolution in support of our application. So tonight's decision is not, yes, we agree on the amount of in-kind hours we have to complete. We want to be very clear about that. There's quite a bit of time between now and the grant agreement process and the scoping of our consultant and the project that we can hammer out some of the specific responsibilities and asks of the in-kind. So I want to be very clear about that before we ask for your action this evening. Okay. I'm happy to take any questions or again, jump back to any other slides.
Questions for Will?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first. Repeat that question for me one more time. Yeah. No.
Is this $5 million for the whole?
$5 million. Yes, this is for the entire planning area. So this would cover every bit of our planning area. And we've heard from USDOT that that's actually a very generous amount for a planning study. Again, because this is purely a planning component. And then the demonstration projects the emphasis is low cost, quick build on that as well.
Mayor Higdon?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution in support of the CRTPO Safe Streets and Roads for All application.
Second.
We've got a first and a second. Any other questions, discussion? If you will allow me one question,
Yes.
kind of to Mr. Jones's point, of the 5 million, how much of that is actually planning dollars? How much of that do you expect to be actually for demonstration projects?
So we have not figured that part out yet. But what I will say is we've heard very clearly from USDOT again that $5 million is very generous to do all of the work that we are trying to do. Lots of MPOs have applied for less. Our peer MPOs have applied for about the same amount. So haven't figured out that share for demonstration projects yet, but we're confident in the number that we're submitting.
And this would be all outsourced to a third party to do the planning? Or is this all going to be done in-house?
80-20. Yeah, not fully in-house. We will be the project managers on it and then ultimately have a consultant or maybe a few consultants supporting us with all the work. So,
I mean, in any of these consultants that you've talked to, if none of them give you an idea. I mean, I'm just thinking if we are awarded this $5 million and you put it out for an RFP, well, guess how much the proposal is going to come back for? $5 million, and we have nothing for demonstration. It's just it's a government math kind of thing. I figured.
no, absolutely. We're sensitive to that. Certainly the marketplace has inflated knowing that IIJA dollars are out there. So I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, Jennifer, if you want to, you have the contracting experience, but haven't heard anything about the number. Yeah.
So I think we were looking at the demonstration grants, potentially more in areas that already have, or towns that already have Vision Zero action plans. So I think we sort of penciled in $500,000. So again, $4 million of grant funds that could go towards planning and the demonstration. And then that $1 million is match. So some of the work would be done through our towns, like public outreach and that type of thing. Hope that helps.
Okay. Right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks.
Fly and a little bit of begging, a whole lot of praying starts right now, right? All right, moving along here. All right, Travis is ready to update us on P 7.0 process.
Hi, everyone. Travis Johnson with CRTPO. Thank you for giving me some of your time tonight. I'm not going to be discussing any new information, but because of the complicate or how complicated prioritization 7.0 can get, I just wanted to drive home some key concepts for some previous conversations. Again, touch on our local input points overview of how those points are allocated, and then discuss some important dates which are coming up this year for prioritization 7.0. So again, when we say prioritization 7.0, these projects will help create the 2026-2035 TIP and STIP. It's important to remember, though, that 2026-2035 STIP is not entirely made up of prioritization 7.0 projects. There are other projects that are in the STIP and the TIP once this process is completed. This is just one of the processes that feed projects into this process. When we say local point assignment, that's when we add points to our P7.0 projects based upon the P7.0 methodology, and that affects the final project score. So that's essentially our opportunity to say, what is the local priorities that we know based upon previous planning work we've done with the MTP, and based upon the overall scores that we receive in cost estimates, to kind of figure out what we want to prioritize specifically for regional impact and division needs. Who adds local input points to projects? That is us, the MPO, and our NCDOT partners in the two different divisions. So can you add a project that's not currently in the prioritization 7.0 list now? So right now we are in the data review and the local input points assignment process. So if you identify any new projects, or if there's something else that's new that's not currently in the list, those are great candidates for P 8.0, and we can work with you to make sure that you're lined up to do all the steps necessary to take care of that. Has there been public engagement so far as part of the process? Yes, there has been. So when we created the original list, we did public engagement for the projects that we were going to submit. It was approved by this board. We're going to do public engagement as part of the local input points assignment, and I'll go over those dates at the end of the presentation. And then when we have our draft TIP and STIP, those projects will again have a public engagement opportunity. So there's many opportunities here for public feedback. Can you see the current adopted STIP or TIP to see just what is in a TIP or STIP beyond just what is projects in a prioritization list? Yes. So we have that projects on our website. You can use the QR code, or you can go to crtpo.org, and it's under the TIP program under adopted. So the adopted TIP and STIP is the 2024-2033. And so on there, you can see all the projects in our communities that are funded through this process. And so if you want to know what's going on, when it's expected to be completed, all that information is available on our website. And that's also available on NCDOT's website. So again, just some key concepts as we start working through this process of prioritization. For local input points, for how the STI law works, when we receive our funding, 40% goes to statewide mobility, and these are statewide projects such as interstates. 30% of the funds go to regional impact, and these are divvied up among the different NCDOT regions. And these are the funding that's given out to each of the NCDOT regions is based upon the population. And then finally, each division receives the final 30, or a division up of the final 30% of the funds, and these are given up equally among each of the divisions. So looking at the scores, so 100% statewide is done through a quantitative process. We don't have local input points. We get the score from NCDOT's spot office, and they are ranked. Projects that do not receive enough points in that steps have availability to cascade down, which means step down to regional impact. We then can affect up to 30% of the overall score through local input point assignment for regional impact. And again, the amount of money in regional impact depends upon which NCDOT region you are in. And then finally, for division needs, we can affect up to 50% of the score using local input point assignment. Now it's important to remember, for local input, the MPO gets half of the local input points that it goes towards a project. So we can affect up to 15% of the score, but it's important to work with our NCDOT partners to affect the other 15% for regional. And then for division needs, it's 25% for the MPO and 25% for NCDOT. So the MPO does not affect the total local input points, we are half and the division is the other half. So again, for the region, when we do statewide, we are competing against the entire state. So we are just one portion of the rest of the state, but our projects compete against projects in Wilmington, projects in Asheville, and there are stipulations that are tied to that. When we talk about the regional impact, Mecklenburg and Union County are in a different funding region than Iredell is. So if your community is in Iredell, you have a different pot of money based upon a different population than you will if you are in Union or Mecklenburg County. And so again, those projects all compete in the rest of that region as well. So the overall scores of ranking go beyond our region as part of this, and then NCDOT ranks projects beyond just our region. When we go into divisions, again, Mecklenburg and Union County are in the same division, and Iredell is in a separate division, Division 12 versus Division 10. So again, it's our friends in Iredell has a different has the same amount of money as the Division 10 has. However, they have different NCDOTs that they work with to prioritize those points. So overall, that all affects what projects you compete with, overall funds that are available, and the processes you follow. And so those are just important delineations of the funds to keep in mind. Because our MPO is rather large, we get a large amount of points to divvy up, which is 2,500 total points for regional impact. And so we split this up 85% for highway projects and 15% for regional transit freight rail projects. And then for division needs, we can have another 2,500 points, and we divvy that up with 80% to highway, which is 2,000 highway points. And then the final remaining 20% of the 500 goes to non-highway projects. And again, that also aligns with the 90% of funds through this process that go to highway projects and the remaining 10% that go to non-highway projects. The SCI legislation requires each MPO to use a methodology to assign points based upon a quantitative and a qualitative input modal allocation. Local input point assignment allocations must be adjusted based upon results of public input, and adjust that vary from methodology must provide a justification. MPO's total local input points is based upon population, which is why we're a larger MPO, so we have a lot of points. We can allocate no more than 100 local input points to a project. So according to our methodology, projects must have a reasonable chance to be funded. We assign the maximum points to be eligible, which is the 100 points. Points from division needs tiers should not be applied to unfunded statewide mobility projects. So again, as it cascades down, those larger statewide projects, once it reaches the division tier, we do not apply local input points to that typically because of the overall cost. We must coordinate with the divisions, Division 10, Division 12, to achieve mutual point assignment. And that's important because again, we're only affecting half of the local input point for each of the two tiers where we have local input points. So we have the best chance of elevating a project if we align with our NCDOT partners. And the board may divert recommendations from the list based upon public comment. And this is why public comment is going to be so important. Spreading the word, making sure your jurisdictions are sharing this information, getting on social media. Just once we have those project scores and we create the draft lists, just making sure we receive the public feedback as part of that. For highway projects, we select them based upon the methodology used in the 2050 NTP, which is where we'll sort them based upon the NTP horizon year, which is when it was expected to be open to the public, and then the overall NTP score. If it does not have an NTP score, then we use the P 7.0 points that were out, or the project score that was provided by the spot office. For non-highway projects, we use the P 7.0 score to allocate the points in non-highway. Every mode has one allocation of local points of that maximum 100 points. And then there was a pre-screen process to ensure that the project was in an adopted plan. And again, this is a smaller pool of money from the highway projects. But all of our highway projects, the ones that are not limited to or have limitations placed on them because there's things such as an interstate, are also complete streets projects that meet NCDOT's requirements. So there will be additional facilities as part of it being a complete street. The P 7.0 subcommittee has volunteered to assist us in this process. I've got the final agreement recently. So these are the members of the TCC and local staff are going to help us review the projects. And again, they're going to be working with us to follow the process we outlined here, which is where we sort the lists from the spot office based upon MTP year, horizon year, and score, apply local points, skip over any that we have local knowledge on that might be a reason to skip. And then we'll share those proposed lists with this board and the public. So for the initial list, we're going to meet in June to formulate that proposed list, and this will be focusing on the regional impact projects. We will bring those scores, that list and the proposed local input point allocations in July, and also be requesting to open a public comment period. The public comment period is proposed to run from July 18th to August 1st. We will then bring a collection of the feedback we receive, any modifications of the list based upon that public feedback in our recommendation. We'll come back to this board in the August. And then we will do this all over again for the division needs tier. Again, that's the second tier we're allowed to apply local input points. Meeting in September, creating that draft list, coming to the TCC and the board to review the draft list and to open the public comment period. Again, working with you to spread the word about the public comment period from October 18th to November 1st. And then coming back for action with a summary of the public feedback we receive. And this is all to align with the deadline of uploading the local input point assignments by NCDOT's deadline to then have our draft tip in January of 2025. So with that, I will stop. Again, this is all similar information, just said in different ways to hopefully through repetition, get us all on the same page. So does anyone have any questions about prioritization 7.0?
All clear as mud, right?
I just wanted to let you know the board is already working on this and it'll be approved probably around a year from now in May or June of next year, but we've already been working on the financial aspects of it and the cost escalation formulas and things like that. So we're on it.
I'm excited to see it.
I'm staying ready in the first, public comment period will start July 18th.
Yeah, as of the schedule lined up right now, and again, we're still waiting for the spot scores the scores from the spot office. So as long as it arrives on time, this is the schedule we are planning on following. And we will update you if anything changes. Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, moving on. Our last agenda item of the evening, update on our MOU evaluation update. And we're gonna, it's gonna be led by Neil and Rajiv, our attorney that we hired as a third-party attorney that represents this board. So it is not employed by Charlotte. He's not employed by Mecklenburg County. He was contracted to represent us in our discussion of the MOU. And I just kind of want to put out there is that we do have a lot of new people here. We have to do nothing with the MOU if we don't want to. So this was an exercise we started last year to, based on the census, is there a time to take a look at this? And we started at that point. So bring us forward of where we've come. Feels like it's been 2 years. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'll just be brief, but I just want to let the board know that this is a two-part agenda item. So we'll have Mr. Shah Khan up here initially talking about his review of the current MOU and his findings. And then I'll do kind of a deeper dive in terms of recommended cost share methodology revisions and the outcome of the final MOU subcommittee meeting on April 30th. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Shah Khan.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I want to note, it's always fun when you see a sign that says do not write on the screen, which means either someone's written on the screen or they're worried someone's going to write on the screen. Whoops. All right, so we're going to talk about 4 issues. First is one that I know many of you have thought about, discussed, and we'll want to talk about a little more, weighted voting. We'll talk about cost sharing, technical changes to the MOU, and then a further process. All right. To the physical left side. Yeah, sounds good. There we go. No, that didn't work either.
Oh, nope.
It's all right. Now let's do it from here. Perfect. Thank you. It's always good when you get the technical folks in here to basically bail us out of a jam. So weighted voting. Well, voting governs all votes of the CRTPO in accordance with the MOU and bylaws. 68 votes are allocated in the MOU. The number of votes allocated to each member government is detailed in section 1F of the MOU. And here's that breakdown. Charlotte has 31 votes. Cornelius, Huntersville, Indian Trail, Iredell County, Matthews, Mecklenburg County, Mint Hill, Monroe, Mooresville, Statesville, and Union County all have 2 votes each. And then everyone else listed, Davidson, Fairview, Marshville, Marvin, Mineral Springs, Pineville, Stallings, Troutman, Waxhaw, Weddington, Wesley Chapel, Wingate, and then Board of Transportation, Division 10 and 12, and the MTC all have 1 vote each. Now, process of weighted voting is governed by Section 1G1 of the MOU, which says a simple majority weighted, and it emphasizes in the parentheses weighted, shall determine all issues except as provided in sections 2, 3, and 4 below. So we just want to make very clear that based on my review of the MOU, the bylaws, and the way it's constructed, and also looking at materials from back talking about the 1992 version of the MOU, where was a memo that staff found from Mayor Lee Myers that noted the weighted voting issues. The weighted voting was a bit different back then in terms of the number of votes, but the point is, it appears clear to us that it governs the actions of the board. So to actually pass an action, you've got to have 35 votes of the 68. Now, here's the difference with items 2, 3, and 4. If it's item 2, if it's a road that doesn't carry an interstate, US, or NC designation, and is only within one municipality's corporate limits or sphere of influence, the location shall be determined only with the consent of that municipality. Effectively, that's a single municipality veto and over a project in a limited circumstance, even if the project were to see for a majority vote. I'll defer to staff from that if that's ever taken place before, but the point is that's a rare time that one municipality, one local government has the ability to veto. Now, if the project is on a road that doesn't carry an interstate, US, or NC route designation, CRTPO can't override the position of any individual local municipality when any portion of the project is within their corporate limits or sphere of influence, except by a 3/4 majority vote of all votes eligible to be cast. 3/4 is going to be important because, as you see in section 4, that also applies when you have amendments to the MOU or the CRTPO bylaws. That requires a 3/4 majority as well. That case, because we did the math, because it's always easy to have someone else do the math, you've got to have 51 votes required to approve amendments to the MOU or the CRTPO bylaws. So the same would hold in section 3 as well. That 3/4 is 51 votes. So the MOU and the bylaws require the use of weighted voting, and require a majority vote when the majority is also determined by the number of weighted votes, or 3/4 supermajority. Again, weighted votes have to be taken into account. And so again, being clear, amendments to the MOU or the bylaws do require a 3/4 supermajority vote to be approved. So if you're making changes to the MOU or the bylaws, you've got to have 51 votes for that. So there are options that we put out there, noting that you could either make no change to the current weighted voting process, you could eliminate weighted voting, or you could modify that. Now, staff chose not to make a recommendation because this is a matter that is clearly a policy matter and not a legal issue. So there are times where those of you who've heard from your town and city attorneys and county attorneys that there are some matters that are purely policy decisions and not legal issues. It's one that, from a staff perspective, we believe would be more appropriate to be discussed by the member governments and then agreed to by a vote of the CRTPO board. And as Neil will talk about later, the MOU renegotiation subcommittee did discuss this issue, did not have a consensus recommendation either.
Can I make a comment?
Go back.
Is that all right?
Sure.
There's several new members here, and I just want to talk about weighted voting for a moment to digest what was just said. Our CRTPO has 27 members. Charlotte and 2 other members can pass a motion if 24 of the rest of us disagree because of this weighted voting. I don't disagree that Charlotte should have a weighted voting, but that's too much. We need 51 for a supermajority to change the MOU or the CRTPO bylaws. That means that cannot ever change unless Charlotte agrees that it could be changed. All of us could vote to change it, but if Charlotte doesn't agree, we can't change it. I think that's too much power for one member of this group. I just want to make that point.
Are there any questions about weighted voting? I was just about to blow through to cost sharing, but it's, I think, good to, are there any other questions about the weighted voting issue?
There might be toward the end, but go ahead.
Sounds good. Moving along, cost sharing, always fun where money's involved. Cost sharing is currently governed by section 1J2 of the MOU. And it says that the required local match of federal aid planning grant funds shall be shared among all municipal and county voting members on a per capita basis. Population total to be used to be calculated municipal county share shall be based on the most recent decennial census. Decennial, of course, being every 10 years. And the method is used to determine that population is as follows. This is where it gets to be fun because, for example, they set up 3 different standards in the MOU. One is the standard used for Iredell County, one for Mecklenburg, one for Union. Iredell's, the important thing is that it took into account annexation areas agreed to by Mooresville, Troutman, and Statesville. And there was, of course, then a proviso because Statesville didn't have a future annexation boundary to its north. So the calculation area line would be the northern edge of extraterritorial jurisdiction. Then Iredell County would be responsible for the areas outside the municipality's calculation areas. Mecklenburg's would be based on the total population within a corporate limit and a sphere of influence. And the county share would be based on the total population of all areas not within a municipal sphere of influence. Union County, of course, had another standard, which the share would be based on the total population within corporate limits and extraterritorial jurisdiction. And the county share would be based upon the total population outside municipal corporate limits and extraterritorial jurisdictions in the planning area. So you've got 3 different standards in 3 different counties. One other thing to note, as long as you're providing your funding, you're considered a member in good standing. If you're not providing your funding, then you'd forfeit your right to be a voting member during the next 2 federal fiscal years. Administration of funding in support of the process would be conducted by the city of Charlotte, which would execute the appropriate agreements with the funding agencies as provided by the Unified Planning Work Program. Now, as I said, the current MOU uses a county-based method for identifying the boundaries of each jurisdiction. Staff noted back in 2023 that the current method lacked uniformity. Shouldn't be a surprise considering that we had 3 different standards set for 3 different counties. You could tell that's clear that's not a uniform standard. So in 2023, staff recommended moving to a pro rata annual share amongst the voting member jurisdictions. In our discussion, staff continues to recommend that change and would suggest that if it is something that would be that the board wanted, that model should change for FY 2026 to enable each jurisdiction to start planning for the changes in that budget process. Now, one thing to note, for the majority of member jurisdictions, costs would be reduced, except for if you're Iredell, Mecklenburg, Union County, Cornelius-Davidson, Huntersville, Waxhaw, and Weddington. But the increases are modest. Iredell County, it's $22,000. Mecklenburg County, almost $23,000. Union County, about $6,500. Cornelius, $166. That's not a typo. It's $166. Davidson, $259. Huntersville, $425. Waxhaw, well, a little higher, almost $3,000. And Weddington, $527. Now, under that new model, the total cost share amount wouldn't result in additional revenues. It would stay the same at the $536,000 level that you currently have. So again, this change would normally result in reductions for most, except for in the cases we outlined above. Now, the board may wish to consider the following options regarding cost sharing: make no change or modify the model. Staff's recommendation is to modify the cost share model to the pro rata annual share amongst voting member jurisdictions. As Neil will discuss, the staff recommended this to the subcommittee and a consensus was reached. Now let's talk about things that only, yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Mayor Beck.
What is the pro rata annual share calculated based on? What is the difference? Is that just eliminating that ETJ and so forth and just using the census population of the unit?
My understanding is that's the case. Neil is nodding his head. Neil, as long as Neil is not shaking his head wildly and saying stop, then I know it's correct. But that's correct. And it would be a uniform standard amongst all, but it would be based on the 2020 census. And then the thing that lawyers like, technical changes to an MOU that may not appeal to anybody else. We'll note back in 2023, CRTPO staff worked with Stuart Pratt at the Charlotte City Attorney's Office on looking at some revisions to the MOU. Now, those revisions were technical in nature and worked to ensure current statutory references were correct and used in the MOU. The revision did not, and we're calling it the Pratt revision because first Stuart hasn't had an opportunity to call it anything, and I've decided we'll just call it the Pratt revision. But it doesn't address weighted voting or cost sharing. And as it does not, and it's purely technical, changing the use of terms to what you currently use them as opposed to terms that you're not using, it may be approvable without being seen as a significant modification of the MOU that would alter the relationships. So because it doesn't hit weighted voting or cost sharing, we think on its own, because it's purely technical changes, you of course have the options to approve that Pratt revision, do not approve it, or send this back to the MOU renegotiation subcommittee, continue the discussions of it. Now, staff recommended approving that, and as Neil will note, the MOU renegotiation subcommittee did reach a consensus recommendation on that. Now, further process. Well, the memo talks about sort of the 60-day listening period. So that's, I think a thing we had noted, but we just want to also point out a couple of things. Depending on what you did, where there were significant changes beyond the technical ones, and I think beyond cost sharing, staff would recommend a process that if you're looking at significant changes, say to weighted voting or things like that, that would be a process where outside counsel would be offered. We would meet with designated representatives of each local government and their legal counsel to determine what changes. And the idea would be to get that input and present everyone with a revised MOU. But if you're not going to make those significant changes, and I think given that, we're really looking at cost sharing and the technical changes as having received consensus recommendations, we'd be available to meet with smaller groups of members to discuss the issues and concerns with the MOU or the current process, or no meetings would be needed. And I think one thing you've seen in the memo that Neil's put together is that an aspect of it will be a listening period that would allow discussion and consideration. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Neil, but before I do that, happy to answer any questions I can.
Questions so far? Okay. Well, I'm sure that we'll come back with questions after Neil's presentation.
I imagine so.
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Neil.
So again, that was the private legal counsel perspective. I just want to offer a slightly different perspective, just summarizing the subcommittee's activities from a staff perspective. And we are handing out copies of my portion of the presentation, just so you can review that. There's a series of charts that highlight the cost share differences for each municipality within each county. So I thought that you might appreciate the additional detail there. So again, my presentation just contains the annual cost share methodology recommendation. I'll try not to repeat too much of what Mr. Shah Khan had identified, and then I'll also provide a summary of the outcomes of the April 30th MOU subcommittee meeting. So the methodology, again, the current MOU that was adopted in 2013, unique methodology for each county, Iredell County, future annexation boundary agreements, Mecklenburg was a mix of corporate limits and spheres of influence. Union County was a mix of corporate limits and extraterritorial jurisdictions. And again, the reason why staff is recommending the change is the challenges associated with this. It's a complicated calculation. Iredale's future annexation boundary agreements are no longer in place. It's difficult to understand and explain how to calculate the cost share. And the shift of that cost share takes the burden away from the counties and puts it on the jurisdictions by including not only the municipal boundary, but those spheres of influence or ETJ areas. Again, our staff's recommendation is to use the decennial census figures for counties and jurisdictions. This would result in a pro rata share for each jurisdiction relative to the total planning area population. Staff feels that this is transparent and it's a uniform methodology. It uses accepted population totals and avoids estimation of population figures for some of those gray areas. And you can see these within the handouts that we've given you, but just to orientate you all, this is Iredell County. I'll go through each of the counties, but the first column on the left there is the population from the 2010 census, the percent of each jurisdiction's population relative to the planning area and what the FY 2024 cost share is today. And then in the green, the next three columns there are the recommended methodology revisions where we're using a different member population. And I'll use Mooresville for an example. The 2010 census, Mooresville had a population of 68,000 because that was not only the municipal boundaries, but that was the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which took in a much greater area. Now we're using the pro rata. That's the census population for Mooresville, which is 50,000 in the 2020 census. So you can see the effect of that, reducing the annual cost share from 37,000 to 22,000 for Mooresville. In contrast, looking at Iredell County, they had a population of 33,000, and that's outside of the municipal boundaries, outside of the ETJ and the annexation boundaries. But now right sizing that population for Iredell, it brings it up to 104,000. And that's anything outside of a municipal boundary in Iredell County. So the impact of that financially is they would experience that increase from 18,000 to 46,000. So it's a relatively significant increase. But again, you're taking that burden away from the member jurisdiction and kind of right sizing it along with the counties. This is Mecklenburg County here. I'll show Mecklenburg County for 2010. They had a population of 758,000 outside of the sphere of influence. Mecklenburg County pays $418 a year. Right sizing that to basically anything outside of a municipal boundary in Mecklenburg, the population goes from 758 to 66,000. As a result, the cost share goes up from 418,000 to almost 30,000. And then this is, again, Union County with the current methodology shown in blue in the first three columns, and then the proposed staff recommended methodology shown in green on the three columns to the right. And jurisdictions with population decreases are reflective in the change of the political boundary calculations, not necessarily a departure of residents. And then this slide just shows the cost share that was paid, in total. This includes the counties and all the municipalities, and then the CRTPO funds that have been allocated in that time. This is from FY 2019 through 2024. And what we're showing here, the column on the left, this is the total population, of all the municipalities and the counties based on the 2020 census. And then the cost share is shown in the middle, and the FY 19 through 2024 discretionary funds allocated. So using Mecklenburg as an example, the total county population is 1.1 million. From the time of FY 19 through 2024, Mecklenburg County and all the jurisdictions have contributed about 2.6 million in cost share, and Mecklenburg County and all the jurisdictions have received $212 million in allocated discretionary funding. Some notes, the discretionary fund allocations do not include Section 5303 funds. Those are the transit planning funds. The funds identified above are for capital and planning projects only through CRTPO's discretionary program, and the Union County population data is for the portion within the CRTPO planning area. There's a couple of portions of Union further east that are in the Rocky River Rural Planning Organization. So the subcommittee met on April 30th, and the subcommittee members that attended were Renee Garner from Matthews, Ed Driggs from Charlotte, Brad Richardson from Stallings, and Chair Qualls from Mooresville. So the subcommittee did recommend board approval to revise the annual cost share provisions in updated MOU to a pro rata calculation methodology beginning in FY26. The subcommittee did also recommend board approval of the technical revisions to the MOU document that Mr. Shah Khan had gone over. And again, those revisions address minor text changes to improve clarity and do not address weighted voting or cost share revisions. And then lastly, Mr. Shah Khan mentioned this, but the subcommittee did not come to unanimity or consensus on the weighted voting provision. And what the subcommittee did decide to do is these particular terms within the MOU, the subcommittee felt that the entire board needs to be a part of this now. And what the subcommittee has laid out is that 60-day comment period for board members on the issue of the weighted voting provision within the MOU. And they've suggested that Mr. Shah Khan and myself, Bob Cook, can meet one-on-one or in small groups with board members regarding questions or concerns that any of the board members have. And I do have Mujib's email listed up there. So this is the summary of the MOU subcommittee meeting last week. And again, the subcommittee did decide to disband after that and have any further discussions come before the entirety of the CRTPO board. So with that, that concludes my portion of the presentation. Happy to take any questions that you all have.
Questions, comments?
Comments on the topic?
Absolutely.
Mr. Shah Khan, Neil Burke, subcommittee, thank you for your work on this. Thank you for your work on the weighted voting. Madam Chair, fellow board, I am new to this committee and I'm impressed with how well I've seen it function in the short time that I've been coming to these meetings. But I do have an observation. I do see that we have an opportunity to exercise continuous improvement and to strengthen the MPO. I'm looking for a more balanced weighted voting structure. Since the 90s, Charlotte has doubled in size, which is impressive, but the surrounding areas, which are our municipalities, have changed in a much more significant way. Many of the municipalities were under 10,000 in population, and it really made sense for Charlotte to be the controlling factor in a lot of these decisions that were being made. Now these towns have grown 3 to 7 times those populations from the 90s. And it makes sense to change the way we include their input. A more representative way of authority aligns with the principles of self-governance. It strengthens the legitimacy and consent for the region. The more it can claim it reflects the will and interest of the entire region. It increases the authority's incentive to act in the interest of the region. And it achieves stability through buy-in. When people feel their interests are represented, they're more likely to accept the decisions and policies. And for these reasons, for the reasons of making it an even better MPO than it already is, I encourage us to relook at the weighting voted structure as it is today. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Councilmember Driggs?
So I guess as Charlotte, I should acknowledge. I am very mindful of the structure. When I came to my first meeting on CRTPO, I told you that I was aware that the voting structure was such that Charlotte had a major impact, and said then that I would be reluctant to cast a vote that wasn't supported by a significant number of other members here. The difficulty in trying to modify it is Charlotte still represents a majority of the population in the MPO and has a minority of the votes. And that was something we agreed to try not to just have a total lock. The federal guidelines for the creation of MPOs suggest that proportionality to population in general is a reference. It's not binding, but that's the thing that they put in across. Charlotte does contribute fully in proportion to its population, in terms of the cost allocation, as we've just seen. The question in my mind as a practical matter is, what would we do with this? And how real an issue is it? I'd be interested to know, for example, in the history of CRTPO voting, how often has any issue been decided by a vote of 34 or 35 votes? And I would submit to you, if you go back and look based on my awareness of the voting, it is almost always by a substantial agreement among the majority of other members with the position taken by Charlotte. So I'm interested to see if there are occasions that people can point to when something got done, and how many occasions out of all the votes this body has taken. And one thing I will also mention is the population is a metric, but I would point out to you, for example, in terms of economic heft, we're about to approve a $4.2 billion budget. And that's a big number. That's a reflection of the economy of the region and how much of it is concentrated within the borders of Charlotte. So I'm interested over the next, I guess we have a 60-day period. I'm interested to hear, for one, maybe get some data on the past history of voting to find out in how many instances there was really a complete divide between the majority of the membership and Charlotte, and also to hear what suggestions, what people think is reasonable, because again, as I say, we're in this position where we've already kind of acknowledged the fact we're in a position where the CRTPO is dominated by one municipality. I don't like to think that we abuse that. Again, my own history in this body doesn't go back that far. So I'll be interested just to hear what data there is and what suggestions there are. I do not want to abuse the fact that we have, as Charlotte, the opportunity with our votes as it currently stands to just quash anything. I don't intend to do that, but I need a response, on a couple of these issues. And how big is this in practice, and what exactly is the suggestion? We cannot get to the point where a group representing a total population of 100,000 people in the voting structure of this body can overrule Charlotte. I just couldn't accept that, or we couldn't accept that. So I hope you'll understand I'm trying to be responsive here, and at the same time need to protect the interests of our city and our population. Thank you.
Right. Other questions, comments?
One other comment I'd like to add. Is there any other metric that could be used for the cost versus population? How about tax base?
Essentially population, right?
Well, it's not. I mean, tax base, you mean like the value of the property tax base, or
Right, or the tax base. I mean, Charlotte's budget versus everybody else's is uncomparable.
Right, and we have a $220 billion property tax base. I'm not sure which tax base you're referring to.
For the calculation cost.
Oh, the cost.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, sure.
Well, I would suggest that if we're talking about the voting structure and how that's structured, we already have a higher percentage of the cost than we have a percentage of the votes as it is, right? And I'm not suggesting for a moment that any comparison like our 4.2 billion control. I'm just trying to use that as an illustration of the fact that the situation we have right now is not unreasonable when you consider the magnitude of the members of this body by different measures. But I think we're in agreement with the pro rata proposal. I think Charlotte would support that. And we would pay our percentage share of the population in spite of the fact that our voting weight is less than that.
And to that point, Neil, I think you were going to reach out to the county managers and kind of have this discussion. You want to share with the board what?
Yeah, so I met with the Mecklenburg County manager. She appears to be in agreement with the modification to pro rata. Union County, I know that the TCC member was trying to meet with the county manager. I haven't heard back yet, but the TCC member didn't think that that would be an issue in terms of pro rata if the CRTPO board approves it. And Iredell County did have some concerns. And I do believe that we're going to kind of reach back out to them again and just try to answer some more questions.
And Mr. Jones, I think your question's more about if I understood correctly, about the cost share.
Yeah, the cost share, not the voting.
Right.
Right.
I mean, is there a different way and I'm not sure how in the tax.
Know if that was dictated by the federal government or not.
Neil, do you know the cost share?
From a staff perspective, using the 2020 census just seemed like the most straightforward way to do it. That we have all of the data for all the jurisdictions and all the counties. Not to say that it's very hard to pull tax-based data, but also, we update those percentages every 10 years after the passage of a census. So, once we have those cost share percentages locked in, it doesn't change too much. I'm not as familiar with tax base to know if those numbers would fluctuate, and then thus your local budgets may fluctuate in terms of what you would contribute each year.
Did that help answer your question? I think that was a very gray no. Just be honest with you. Other questions or comments about the cost share, the technical language? Wait about yes, Renee.
As we met as a subcommittee, I think it's important that we acknowledge the regional nature of our economy and our workforce, and that Matthews residents don't stay on Matthews roads, Charlotte residents don't stay on Charlotte roads. The majority, 96% of our workforce in Matthews comes from outside of Matthews every day. And so when we're making these decisions, we aren't making them as one body at a time. Our Matthews residents are living in Matthews, going into Charlotte and filling the C-suites of the Charlotte high rises. So it's, we have to think about our future voting structure in that sense. I was the one member of the subcommittee who could not get on board with maintaining the same weighted voting structure. And I would be wary of using cost share as a metric of votes, because Charlotte does give a significant amount of dollars to support the CRTPO. It also can be seen as a pay for vote, and none of us want that. On July 22nd, I was not aware of the weighted vote until July 22nd or July of 2022, excuse me, when we first voted to explore the P3 for I-77, which is something that keeps coming up in front of us. It was a Zoom meeting at that time. I didn't realize that Charlotte had 31 votes. Most of us on the call did not. When we took a vote whether we would move forward or not, 6 members voted that yes, we would explore the P3. 8 members voted that no, we would not explore the P3. The meeting ended and we were all going, the P3 is moving forward, but the majority of people who raised their hand said no, not move forward. And that's when this really became an issue, understanding why that vote was carried forward. So that was July 2022. If you're interested in some alternatives, Rob Kidwell, who was representing Huntersville before Nick came on board, came up with some, he went through MPOs across the country and looked at their structure. I looked at some a little closer to home than he did, and some of those MPOs have a weighted structure where the seat that has the most votes is actually split up so that there's a diversity of opinion making one vote. So let's say Charlotte had 3 seats, maybe one person has 15 votes and the others are divided, 8 and 8 or something like that. And that's one option. So there are other options. We just didn't get around to discussing it as a subcommittee. If anyone's interested, I'd love to talk to you about some of the options that Rob represented when he was on the subcommittee, and kind of explain maybe where he was going. I'd like to bring that information forward because I feel like it was worth exploring a little more than we did as a subcommittee.
Right. Others? I missed somebody over here.
I do have one, Lisa. To Ed's point, Neil, can we get, I'm sure we've got it, but I would like to see what historic votes have been taken over. I don't know how, don't go back to Methuselah, but just kind of see, because I sit on so many different committees and it seems like the vast majority of the votes tend to go 5-0 or whatever the case might be. Because you're all in alignment, but I'm sure there's times we have not been in alignment, and I'd like to see historically where that has fallen, because I think it would be advantageous for all of us to see that.
I'm interested, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm interested to see that as well. And I would note though, when you hear a comparison like it was 8-6 and it carried anyway, gee whiz, what a miscarriage. You know, let's add up the populations represented by each of those votes and see exactly what that representation constituted in terms, because you can't just count the heads. You really can't. I mean, you've got Troutman and Charlotte. So it's going to take some sort of reflection. And in that, let's take that case, July 22nd, what was the total population of the 8 people who voted against and of the 6 who voted in favor? And what I'm getting at in a way is, what kind of a modification of the voting structure is responsive to the issues that are being raised here and still fairly represents the position of Charlotte in this group. And I'm trying to figure out what that balance is. I think we'll get some of that data, and we've got a couple of months now, right, before the vote, and then we'll see what options there are.
Yep. So, yes. Go.
Yeah, with all due respect to Councilman Driggs, if that's the case, then why are any of the rest of us even here? Why doesn't Charlotte just decide everything? You have an overwhelming position from population. We can't compete on that basis. The fact that Charlotte can pass anything at once by only getting 2 other members of this board really minimizes us totally. I mean, why are we here if our vote is so inconsequential? And Charlotte, we can't change the MOU unless Charlotte agrees, essentially. I mean, it's got to be a little more fair. I want to recognize that Charlotte has the majority of the population, but you can't just totally write off the rest of us. We represent folks also.
If I may, what I want to avoid for all of our sake is the creation of a perception that there's an us versus them going on here. We are all part of a region. We all have many shared priorities. That is why most of the votes on this body are unanimous. So I hope we won't predicate the conversation on the perception that there needs to be a confrontation between Charlotte and everybody else. I think Charlotte tries in its own planning process to think on a regional basis and to be sensitive to input that we get from other members here. So what we're coming down to is what happens if there's a disagreement. And I just hope we don't design our whole governance on the premise that there's going to be a disagreement. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Let's go to Mayor Becker first.
Made me think of, Councilwoman Garner made me think of, I think the example of that vote, if it was a Zoom meeting on a P3, I pretty much think that I, as the delegate of the second smallest in population municipality in the, on this board, I think I voted in favor of the P3 motion. So I was one of the 6, and I had 1 vote. And because so even though 6 and 8 members voted against it, 6 voted for, I actually felt empowered that my vote sort of had more power. So I didn't feel that it's a waste of time for me to come, Mayor Higdon, because it just depends on what the issue is. But I've never felt overwhelmed by Charlotte. I looked at the issue. I had my own feelings about it. So it so happened that it coincided with Charlotte's vote, but I don't think that I felt that my vote was insignificant. In fact, in that case, somebody who voted against it may have felt insignificant, but that happens. So it's just interesting that in that particular case, it was kind of a reversal for my jurisdiction. The tiny one actually won a vote that we probably wouldn't normally win. And it's not a win and loss. I mean, I'm respectful to what Councilman Driggs said. Councilman Driggs said it's not an us against them, but it still was a win of a vote, and it's nice if a vote goes your way, whatever the reason is, as long as it's fair and by the rules. So I just wanted to make that observation because I didn't think about it until Councilwoman Garner brought it up, but You know, that was one of the few times it's actually come down to such a close vote where Neil's been counting each individual thing and adding up the votes. And it's very seldom that you see Neil having to do that. I can count on maybe more than one hand, but less than two, the times that Neil's had to do that. So,
And that sounds like some of the data that we're gonna.
yeah, and we'll get that data. I'm anxious to see it because I was just gonna look up those minutes, but then I said, I'll just ask.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, just another quick comment. I think I agree with Councilman Driggs in that most of our votes have been unanimous or very close to unanimous. My frustration comes specifically from the PP3 conversation where I think the majority of people on this board historically have not been supportive, but it passes every time because Charlotte is supportive. Neil, when the attorney was up, he mentioned, Mr. Shah Khan mentioned that was there another voting weighted methodology when Lee Myers, who by the way was the mayor of Matthews, was there a different methodology when he was mayor? And what, if so, what was it?
Mayor Higdon, what I was referring to is that the weighted voting was still the same, but it was just the number of votes were different. For example, instead of 31 votes, I think Charlotte had 9. But there was a list of, it had just been modified. So the vote total was actually far less for all the municipalities involved. So it wasn't a different model. It was a weighted model, but again, the numbers were different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of my question. Who came up with 68? Why was that why couldn't it be 34 or 96?
Great point.
Why was it 68?
So that was a completely political decision, and it came on the heels of Iredell County being a part of the Charlotte urbanized area. And also the board at the time recognized that jurisdictions with a population of greater than 20,000 deserved 2 votes. Everybody deserved at least 1 vote. So it really, there's nothing magical about 68.
Sense. Okay. One last comment. and then
Yeah,
we'll
just
move on.
to clarify though, when Charlotte had 9 votes, Mecklenburg County had 3. So there was a different ratio there. Mecklenburg County had, a third of the votes, where now if that were the case, they would have 10 to Charlotte's 31. Now, currently they have 2.
Super. Great comments, great conversation. As we stated, we're going to open up this kind of 60-day time period for conversations with our attorney, and everybody got this handout on purpose so that you would have his information readily at your hand. You didn't have to dig through an email to reach out and have those conversations. And we'll bring back the data that's been requested at the next meeting so that can be reviewed in time coming into the July timeframe for that. So it's a lot of details, a lot of information, good discussion. And we'll keep progressing along here to what's going to be on the upcoming agenda. Neil?
Thanks, Chair Qualls. So I want to remind the CRTPO board that in observance of the Juneteenth holiday, the CRTPO meeting has been rescheduled from the 3rd to the 4th Wednesday of the month. So the June meeting date will be Wednesday, June 26th. Let me know in advance if you can't attend due to a conflict. I want to make sure that we have enough votes for a quorum. The June 26th board agenda is anticipated to include CAT's tip amendment, and then information reports on the discretionary program supplemental funding recommendations, an update on the P 7.0 process that Travis talked to us about tonight. By that time, we think that we'll have the scores and we'll be into the assignment of local input points with the P7 subcommittee. We'll receive an update on Beyond 77. And we're anticipating another I-77 corridor update from NCDOT. As far as an announcement, staff is working to set up a follow-up education session based upon what you all heard at the education session tonight regarding the Turnpike Authority. And we're hoping that this can be on the June 26th CRTPO board agenda. So we will provide additional details regarding another education session throughout the next month. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. Yes, we've talked to CAT staff and they are going to, I believe they're going to start the meeting, the MTC meeting early so that there isn't an overlap, hopefully.
Good point. Right. Mr. Lathrop, do you have anything that you can share from the board?
Reminder of the Transportation Summit, which is next week.
Tuesday, Wednesday?
And I know you're gonna be leading panel there on grants that I'm gonna be helping with monitoring. I mean, there'll be everybody, or virtually everybody in North Carolina who is involved in transportation will be there. Over 1,000 people. A lot to be learned, a lot of people to be met. If you're interested in transportation, it's the place to be next week. Recommend it to you.
Right. And then I think, Jennifer, you still got you're putting out the fall call is gonna come, right? Don't forget about that. It's gonna slip up on us. Everybody's gonna take off for summer, on that very quickly with that. As everybody heard, starting out our meeting with Andrew's presentation about his project from a small town that has basically a staff of either 2 or 1, depending on what's going on up there and how they utilize staff. Everybody got a letter that Neil and the staff put together on what your discretionary grants that you've received since 2019. Hopefully you found that valuable and you'll share that with the rest of your board. That's what it's about, of all of us working together to utilize these dollars to get them out in our communities. If you have not taken advantage of doing putting together a grant, I know Ernestine is anxious to put together something. And so I think if we can all encourage one another that if you don't have staff, it's okay. We've got CRTPO staff. That's why you're here. That's your why of coming here. It's not about a vote. It's about how we're going to put these dollars to work in our communities and take advantage of the CRTPO staff. And I don't mean take advantage of in that sense, but please utilize CRTPO staff. And if you, yeah, so, sorry, Neil. Bob, you're gonna get a lot of calls tomorrow. But utilize them. And if it's not you, get to your town managers, whoever in your rank and file folks and say, listen, we want those dollars in our community. Take advantage of it. Do it. So that's my soapbox for tonight. If everybody's okay, we'll get a motion to adjourn. Everybody motioned that, right? You got a couple, got a second? So moved. All of those in favor, aye. Yo, please